IVM.
Hello and welcome to Simblified, the podcast that aims to make you smarter with minimal effort. We are your three hosts, and as always, we will start the show with a random fact about ourselves so that we don't seem like three faraway, godlike hosts to you, but like friends sharing innermost secrets, desires, and underwear sizes with each other. We are going to start theming our random facts so that it's easier for us to come up with them. This time it's about things that we stole. And so I'm Chuck, and my random fact is that I've stolen two things in my lifetime. Chewing gum from a store when I was 8 and a pen from a supermarket when I was 15. I know, not my proudest moments. I don't know what came over me.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Shriketh, and the thing I stole was quite funny actually. I was in one of the earliest supermarkets in Ahmedabad, and instead of outright stealing a pack of Variali, which is basically...
Really?
I actually punctured a hole in it and kept eating it while it was still in the rack. So I just kept eating one piece of Variali out of that rack while I was in the store, walking around. And a store attendant saw me and said crime to my mother.
Oh, no.
And I got quite badly punished for it. But yeah, a pack of Variali was what I stole.
For eating or for eating that or for...
No,
for
I think it was more
stealing?
for the shoplifting,
Okay,
yes.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, so
You've stolen hearts, of course.
Yeah, no, I have stolen, I thought I stole hearts, but apparently no such luck. So when my younger son was very small, both my children were small, my wife had a stick which she kept for disciplinary purposes. So yeah. So she used to sort of, if these people.
No. My question was, which one of the three was that for?
I never. Not much at any rate. So she had this stick, and my younger son would keep breaking the law very often. So one day he broke the law in some particularly egregious way, and he was very sure that his mom would find out about it. So he was an extremely charming child. So he charmed me and convinced me to steal that stick. Because he knew that if he stole it...
This is disqualified. Your story is disqualified. It is not technically stealing, Naren.
Wow.
But anyway, continue the story.
Yeah, I know
what happened.
I don't care. Go on.
So I do that, right? So I steal it. And because he doesn't want to be,
incarcerated.
So I have to steal it and hide it somewhere. So I hide it on top of a cupboard. And
does it qualify as stealing if you actually paid for it? But okay.
Then she comes back and she finds out what the transgression was, and she's like, let me find a stick, and it's not there. So she puts this guy under the lights. So where is it? I don't know. And then she looks around and she's like, I don't know, like Mrs. Sherlock Holmes. She figures out. In about 2 minutes, she's figured out it's on top of the cupboard. And then more Sherlock Holmesing, she realizes the only guy tall enough to put it there. Yeah, so a very frank opinions.
Two Shinoy men were caned that day.
About father.
One physically, one verbally.
So that is the...
And we still don't know which one was which. Okay. So from Naren's slippery getaway, we will now segue into the topic, which is, sneakily enough, about oil prices. You might have noticed that your petrol bills have been going up of late. We shall investigate why. And why do they keep going up and down, and why can't they just make up their minds? So yeah, we are going to be looking at a whole host of factors that control oil prices, why India pays so much for oil. We'll talk about those charming gentlemen who run OPEC, and yeah, all that on the other side of this break. So stay tuned, yes.
So welcome back to this exciting episode of Simplified, where we are going to talk about
oil prices. The most exciting.
And oil prices. And
but before that, we can't get into the topic without talking about the profundity of the
Minute.
A minute. Okay, this is actually...
We have decided it's profundity of the arbitrary period of time.
This is actually... So I was very tempted to use the oil price graph of... dubious mathematics and statistics. You know what I'm talking about.
The beautiful brainchild of the BJP IT cell.
Yeah. So I was very tempted to use that because that's extremely profound if you think about a mind-bendingly clever way of using mathematics to deceive the masses. But I have another profundity which is strangely enough also related to oil. And this is very simple. Huh? This is not one of those complicated things that we need to paint a picture. This is very simple. 2 lines. May your happiness increase like the price of petrol. May your sorrows fall like Indian rupee. Simple. I like it. Non-complicated profundity of the day.
Very nice.
But before we segue, we have to roast it a little more. No? So here I came up with some more. May your happiness multiply like the communities who refuse to use contraception. May your promotions come regularly and predictably like Trump's tweets after somebody has criticized him. May your health system be as immune as right-wing parties who have committed murder and have the protection of the ruling party. May your life be as exciting and each day bring a new surprise like people who have to stay in Syria and Yemen.
Oh, wow.
May you be able to weed out things in your life that you don't like how the Myanmar government has got rid of Rohingyas. And finally, may you achieve enlightenment like Elon Musk smoking his first joint on Joe Rogan's podcast.
And may your enemies fail miserably in ruining your plans, just as the Indian team does.
Is doing currently as we record. Their 7th wicket has fallen, and we wonder. I think by the time you will have known about the India's terrible defeat in this Test series.
Yeah,
but yes.
No, don't. Jadeja will do something. Anyway, so with that we get into a topic of the day, which is why do oil prices change? Right, like the average person in our heads we know is a fast depleting resource, so the less of it there is, obviously producing it will give you a higher price, etc. But why does it go up and down? In our heads we know somewhere that it's somewhat related to politics and that OPEC thing, which countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran and all that who have a lot of oil, they control this price. This is what generally people know.
But so why did they name an oil price controlling body after a rock group? Oh, that's Opec. Oh, okay. I misheard. Sorry. Ignorance.
Chuck has just, for the benefit of our listeners, Chuck has exited the studio and is currently in the process of ritualistic seppuku.
Wow. Let me say, I did not expect that to come out of you.
Excellent.
Must be careful. I'm just checking if there are any other cartels here that rhyme with Cannibal Corpse. Just checking. Wow. Did not expect that, Naren.
Yes. I think just for the clarity of all listeners who may not be Opeth fans, Opeth is
a Swedish prog metal
band. OPEC, on the other hand,
is not a Swedish prog.
Is definitely not a Swedish prog.
However, petroleum does derive its name from rock oil. So,
there is a connection.
There is a connection.
There is some connection.
Some connection is there. Okay.
When you hear petroleum being poured, you can listen to the prog notes faintly in the background. Oh man.
Oh, frack it. Anyway, so
no wonder the Metallica song, "Give me fuel, give me fire."
Oh, Naren, please make such mistakes in the future. It's very useful. Okay, so first we are going to talk about. So we are going to split this up. We are going to talk about oil prices in general around the world and what controls their scene, and then we'll get to Indian scenario, which is of course a totally different kettle of fish or barrel of oil, I should say. So simply put, oil prices are determined by 3 things: supply, demand, and geopolitics. And these 3 come together to make a heady mixture. Supply is simple. How much oil is out there? Simple, right? The less the oil, the more the prices.
Of course.
Yeah. Now OPEC, which we'll get into a little detail later, just think of it now as a conglomeration of countries that make oil. They claim to have around 1.5 trillion barrels of oil, which we should do for a while. 1 barrel, by the way, is 42 gallons. Not sure if any Hitchhiker's references were... which is 159 liters, as you have no doubt calculated already. And it takes only 7.3 barrels to make 1 metric ton, which I thought was, wow, that's it.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, interesting, yeah. And so when we say 1 barrel, it's 1 barrel of crude oil, which is, and Naren is the smartest of the lot over here. Please correct any technical mistakes that I have made. Naren does non-PPT things, which means he's an expert on everything from lathe to petroleum. So 1 barrel of crude oil gives you several things. So it's not like 1 barrel can entirely be converted into petrol. The largest part of it is gasoline or petrol, around 20 gallons. 10 gallons of diesel. There are a lot of other things like heavy fuel, liquefied petroleum gas, jet fuel, and other things which a lot of the byproducts are used to create lots of things like Vaseline and things like that, right? So this is supply.
It's a whole bunch of alkanes actually.
Yeah.
Which
we will not get into actually. So that's a supply. So now we know there's a lot of stuff out there. Now the next thing is demand. Do we need oil? So yes, the short answer is yes, because ever since the industrial revolution and now the technological revolution, we needed to power everything from our smartphones to industry. And as more countries start developing, their appetite for electricity and petrol and oil in general just keeps growing. So the biggest spike came thanks to China in the early 2000s, and that was really when oil boom took off. Now suppose these were the only two things in the equation, supply and demand. It would have been like quite neat, right? Because we know what supply and demand is. Market forces will determine, like if the world needs more oil, OPEC will pump more oil, and prices will increase or decrease accordingly, right? It's like that's how supply and demand works, right? People who want soulless commercialized cricket, that gives them a dopamine rush for 4 hours rather than meaningful nuance. Here's the IPL for you. It works that way. Supply and demand is nice, predictable. Oil becomes expensive, people start buying fuel-efficient cars.
Yeah.
If the oil price drops, cool, people start buying SUVs and gas guzzlers, or the other way around. But life can't be as simple as that, which is where the third thing in the equation comes, which is...
Noida.
What?
Yeah, I was thinking of like, life isn't as simple. No matter whether oil price goes up or down, cars will always get sold in Noida.
Fair enough. No, but I was going for geopolitics actually.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Not too far away from Noida.
Not too far away from Noida. No, that is geopolitics. Very subtle.
Quite.
Anyway, okay. Now is where we need to talk about OPEC. Chances are when you think of the words oil tycoon, a positive image almost never forms in your mind. Like, there is no scenario. Like add Russian also to this.
Oh my God.
Strange enough, Russia is not a part of OPEC.
Ooh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Never positive. You think of... Yeah, like when you think of oil tycoon, you think of rich, greedy, Bentley-driven heads of states who use the fact that they've got a very limited resource by luck of geography and not hard work, and will use that precious commodity to dictate politics and affect the lives of billions around the world. And I personally think this is a very, very, very unfair depiction of oil tycoons, because sometimes they ride Mercedes as well. So,
fair.
Yeah, OPEC is a cartel, and the most surprising thing about OPEC for me is that the O does not stand for oil, which I've always thought. It's Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which could very easily also be oil and petroleum exporting companies also. So much confusion. So the first 5 members were, and see if you can spot the odd one out over here: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela.
Yeah, you introduced them like also they were a band, like the first 5 members were.
I know the odd one.
Iran on the base.
Yeah, but I'm guessing you guys can spot the odd one out, Venezuela.
Venezuela.
And the reason why Venezuela has suddenly got admission into this, otherwise largely, let's say Middle Eastern, because I don't want to offend people by stereotype, because... the reason is, surprisingly, Venezuela has the largest natural reserves of oil in the world.
Whoa.
Yeah. And like, it's
socialist
not that,
country.
Yeah, and it's not that huge a country if you think about it on a map. For people who don't know, Venezuela is in South America. It's like, think about the part where North America is connected to South America. After that, it'll that Costa Rica, Panama thing in the middle, and just वहां से थोड़ा right. Like, that is Venezuela. It's not a very huge country, and they've got 300 billion barrels of reserves proven. Which is 30 billion or so more than Saudi Arabia.
Whoa.
With all that size. Yeah, exactly. That's how large Venezuela is. But that being said, Venezuela is also rather untapped. Their production per day, I'll get into more numbers later, but their daily output is less than 1/5 of what Saudi Arabia does, for instance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So basically they have a ton of oil, but they don't really pull it out.
Yeah.
Whereas Saudi has perfected the art over
Yeah.
there.
Oh, yeah. Knowing how the Saudis operate, they should master the art of pulling out a little more, actually. Now, OPEC with these esteemed members, do you know where it's headquartered? Vienna.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
As like a vacation location.
I think they realized that, listen, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. I don't think any of these places. I think they had the prescience to note that stability was not going to come very easily to any of these. They said, "Chalo, we'll go to the place that created Hitler." Chal. In 2018, as of 2018, membership is for 15 countries. I'll read them out to you. Algeria, Angola, Ecuador, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya, Nigeria, Qatar, Congo, Saudi Arabia, who is the de facto leader, of course, UAE, and Venezuela. These 15 countries control 44% of the oil production around the world and hold 82% of its reserves. Now, first, this was pretty interesting to me because I always thought that OPEC meant all the countries that export oil. But OPEC, over the course of its history, has pissed off a lot of people, etc. as well. So, the largest producers of oil who are not part of this are Russia. Canada has a lot of oil. So, US gets most of its imported oil from Canada. And a few other countries as well, Mexico and...
US itself.
Yeah, the US itself, actually, yeah. The stated mission of OPEC is to coordinate and unify the petroleum prices of member countries and ensure the stabilization of oil markets in order to secure an efficient economic and regular supply of petroleum to customers, a steady income to producers, and a fair return on capital for those investing in the petroleum industry. Well, noble enough, I guess.
Or sinister.
So, yeah.
They could have just added Varna at the end of it.
So, we'll get into the Varna part actually right now. Because being an OPEC member is not easy. There are production quotas. It's very strict. So, OPEC tries to regulate. So, you have to reach a certain production quota, but you should not go above that. Because then it technically means that you can sell that on the sly without needing to report it to. There is a annual $2 million membership fee. Not sure if that comes with a complimentary diary or not. Like that, but sure.
It's a bit more than car gym.
Indonesia and Ecuador are former members, and in 1995, Gabon suspended its membership, which surprised me. I didn't know it was a country.
Oh, okay.
The default leader is, of course, Saudi Arabia. But actually, the history of oil and OPEC it's quite interesting, actually. Post-World War is when things really took off, and I think we should take a break and we'll get back into this glorious era of decolonization and giving back or getting back at the imperialist pigs, as it were. And that is really where that's really where the story of OPEC started. So yes, on the other side then.
Yeah.
Hey, it's been another great week on IVM Podcast. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Also, please do spread the word about podcasting. You are our biggest ambassadors. If you tell somebody to listen to a podcast, that is the way that we're going to grow this space. This week on Simplified, the Simplified gang breaks down the funda of oil prices and why India pays so much for fuel. This week on Cyrus is joined by writer and film personality Raj Grover. He regales us with stories from partition and the heyday of Indian cinema of the 50s and 60s. On the Pragati podcast, Pawan and Hamsini discuss the government regulations that make the lives of restaurateurs difficult in Bangalore. They've got a really special guest. Manu Chandra is on that along with Madhu Menon. This week on IVM Likes, IVM staffers Janam, Abbas and Surbi sit down and talk about movies that didn't live up to the hype. Last week, the Rediscovery podcast went live with their 4th season. Listen to the first episode as Ambika and Hoshna talk about quitting their jobs for traveling and is it for everyone. On Shunya 1 this week, Shiladitya and I speak to Sairi Chahal. She's the founder of Sheroes, which is India's largest online community for women. This was another really, really interesting talk. And with that, let's get you on with your show.
Welcome back to this exciting story about oil prices and whatnot, which Chuck is regaling us with.
Emphasis on the whatnot.
Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about the history of OPEC, because that's really going to form the bulwark. Is that the right word?
Wow, well
yeah,
done.
I know, well done. Memorize that just for the show.
You've cleared the bulwark of your bingo.
Okay, so it is the 1950s and 60s, post-war, full world was recovering. There was a fair amount of consumerism happening around the world. Oil was controlled by 7 MNCs, and most of these were US and UK based, and you might have heard of some of these. And these companies eventually became some of the companies that you know today, like British Petroleum and Chevron and things like that. Yeah. These guys were largely responsible for controlling oil prices, and it reached a point where they reduced it uncomfortably, right? And OPEC formed in a way to reclaim oil resources from these folks. They said, hey boss, we have enough oil resources. Like, these guys were going to these countries and they were drilling out oil and they were selling it at such a low price that the countries themselves felt like they were getting a raw deal. So they said, okay, time to put an end to this nonsense, and we are going to take a little more control so that we can basically get the money that we deserve, because boss, they're our natural resources at the end of the day. So we started OPEC.
So they did a lot of bad things. So I don't know if it appears in yours. One of the bad things they did was they assassinated a democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, who was doing a lot of good things. And they assassinated him because he said, dudes, you guys are stealing our oil. And he decided to nationalize the oil fields. They assassinated him and they put the Shah back into power, and which is what resulted in Khomeini's because Shah did so badly on every single front that they just the revolution just happened.
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't even have to try. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there as a corollary to this particular incident, there is like everywhere, anything that you see from the US point of view and its military involvement, just follow the order.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, they did a lot of things like this. Not to the extent of assassination, but when OPEC gained enough strength, and the US then started becoming increasingly reliant on OPEC because they were getting addicted to oil. During the Arab-Israel war, where obviously the US would side with Israel, which was not what the Arabs, which were majority of the OPEC countries, OPEC did an oil embargo to the US. Yeah, so shortage across...
this is in 73.
Yeah, in the early 70s, correct. And so suddenly then, US was the newly addicted US was like a marketing professional now asked to live life without PowerPoint. Yeah. So this is when OPEC started to gain proper muscle. They started gaining market. And here's the thing, when non-OPEC countries like a Canada or whoever, they started, they had their own reserves, and if they started gaining market share, OPEC would reduce their prices to price these guys out of the market. They operate like a true cartel. And obviously what would happen is, and this is largely dictated by Saudi Arabia, some of the smaller countries, like some of these African countries, they obviously felt dudes, we are getting even less for our natural resources because of these cartelization politics and stuff. So it's not always been friendly. Problems like these have happened. Some countries gleefully have ignored the production quotas. So, then Saudi Arabia did something which was almost anti-OPEC by itself. It operated at full blast. It operated at full capacity, which then basically what that happened was it plummeted the price of oil to $7 a barrel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And at around this time, there was suddenly a lot of oil got discovered in a lot of places, like in Alaska and all. There were huge fields that were discovered. So this is a period of peak. This is a period called peak oil, where everybody is producing more oil, strangely enough, than the world could actually consume or needed. This is also a time when China's growth was growing like crazy and stuff. But then eventually the reverse also happened, where the price, mid 2000s was when oil prices started hitting $100 to $150 a barrel. So it's quite a fluctuation, right? It's And you can now see how geopolitics is determining, is more than just supply and demand. Like from $7, it became $150 in the space of whatever, less than a couple of decades. Saudi Arabia panicked, saying that the world economy would collapse. They again produced more oil. The financial crisis happened. Again, prices crashed. So you see again now how this whole thing is going up and down. You can see why there are very few people who are at high risk of blood pressure working in the oil industry at this stage. Another interesting thing is to see where the United States gets its oil from. Most of it, around 40%, is its own right now, because of they found shale and they pioneered fracking and things like that. They get a lot of they get about 20% from Latin America, which is Mexico and Venezuela. And then there's Canada, and only about 13% from the Persian Gulf. So this is interesting actually. So a lot of Americans actually feel that if we piss off the Gulf too much, our oil will be cut off, which is not the case at all. 40%.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem like a big percentage at all. It's like
it's 20%.
20%.
And something that can be made up by their own reserves, or just stop being dicks to Canada.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. So again, OPEC says the world has 1.5 trillion barrels of crude oil, and the world uses about 34 billion barrels per year. And that's obviously a number that's growing. And some estimates say that we have used 1 trillion barrels ever since oil drilling has been commercialized in the late 1800s. British Petroleum says we have enough reserves for about 53 more years. So practically speaking, that's how much oil is left in the world at current demand, current growth, basically.
Current growth,
yeah. And keep in mind that OPEC's interests are only petroleum right now. So all this newfangled nonsense about renewable energy is kind of pissing them off.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So it's keeping its... So here's the interesting thing. And again, here is where geopolitics comes in, and supply and demand are not the only two members in the equation, which is why this whole thing circles back to what I was talking about. OPEC is deliberately keeping oil prices low so that renewable energy will always be more expensive. Yeah, so consumers naturally won't shift. It's only people out of the goodness of their hearts who, people who are woke and subscribe to Musk's theories will install a battery pack in their home or whatever.
And which is where, honestly speaking, the sophistication of the drilling techniques and how efficiently all of these countries are drilling oil, the fact that, it actually leads to the point that there's probably enough oil to be supplied to the world instantly as much as required. But the point is they are currently holding all this oil so that they can control the prices better. And it's used as, they can overnight reduce the prices to an insane extent and overnight spike
and
it
that's
up
a
as
scary
required.
part. And that's a scary part, right?
So it's like, effectively it's currency manipulation in some
way. Pretty much. And here the funny part, Saudi Arabia is very publicly doing this massive shift to renewables, making it very public that we as a country want to move away from oil, and that is pissing the rest of OPEC off. For obvious reasons. One, you're keeping the price of oil low so that you make enough money, or rather you...
This is something like this thing, where it said that what do we say? Bill Gates and his family, there are no devices allowed inside their house. Like, they're selling computers to the rest of the world and no devices are allowed in their house.
And now here's the other interesting thing. Geopolitics that affects oil prices is not just interstate but also intrastate. If you think about it, like a policy change within a country, like one of these OPEC countries, like could change so much internationally. Like Venezuela going and nationalizing all its oil companies.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like that suddenly affects a lot of things. Suddenly affects output. Suddenly affects OPEC, which in turn, affects the entire world. Then there are other things, non-OPEC countries that are sneakily making up supply. Like if OPEC says that we will cut down demand, Russia will come in and say, take this extra barrel. And will make up the supply. China is another very naughty fellow.
This is one of these Yes Prime Minister episodes. There is this fictitious country known as Qumran. This guy is, Jim Acker say, why are we messing around with? And Humphrey says, they're true friends of Britain. They tell us what the Soviets are up to and do something, and they even sabotage OPEC agreements for us. We can't afford to offend them.
China is an extremely interesting case over here, and we'll do a full episode on China's sort of infrastructure diplomacy, as I'd like to call it. They go and set up infrastructure projects everywhere where there is oil, and then quietly say, that
we'll take the payment
we'll take the oil. So they basically are insulated from OPEC and the fluctuations, because they set
and
up.
they're not using up dollar as the currency.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
they are doing a quid pro quo. So they did that with Iran a lot. Yeah.
Liquid pro quo in this
Liquid
case. Old joke, but anyway, I think Asterix made it first. So yeah, that's basically all. These are the reasons why oil prices have been going up and down around the world. It's complicated.
Just
obviously.
to add one more layer of complexity, so I know a little bit about the solar energy world because I've done a little bit of work in it. And the thing is that, as you rightly said, oil prices are what is holding up investment in solar. And we've been only seeing solar panels, that is photovoltaic solar, as the solar energy thing. But photovoltaic panels, that is, the solar that we know, is not optimum because it does not provide what is called dispatchable power. That is, it doesn't give you power when you want. It gives power only between 9 and 5.
Correct.
And in order to give power around the clock, you need to store it. And in the current state of technology, storing electrical power in batteries is very expensive. So electrically storing electricity is not feasible. So how else do you store it? So there's a bright idea people are working on, which is storing it in the form of heat. So what you do is you take the solar energy, you concentrate it and melt a lot of salt, and you store the molten salt and use that to drive your turbines. Convert water into steam, drive steam turbines. So that's broadly what it is. And it is enormously difficult. So it needs the invention of a lot of new technologies. How do you manage a molten salt at 600 degrees? Like billions of tons of it? How do you store it without the heat escaping? Things like that. But should these technical problems be sorted out, we have enough area, like we can obviously all this has to run, to give us practically free electricity for the rest of the foreseeable future.
Wow.
And if that ever happens, these oil countries are instantly emasculated, right? That's very worrisome for them. And Saudi Arabia is doing that. So they're trying to build some kind of a nation before that event is eventually going to happen. It's either we are going to, either one of these idiots is going to pull the nuclear trigger and we are all going to die.
In fact, that's
hopefully that will not happen before this episode reaches you guys. But
you never know.
I mean, in fact, the whole bunch of... So, in fact, Saudi has been in the news recently for a lot of their progressive policies, especially with regards to women driving and a few more other progressive policies that the Sheikh is currently making. And a lot of those are actually... some of the commentary around that, which I was reading, was around the fact that they are trying to transition out of being a oil-based economy, and the oil-based economy has allowed, because they had the money, they could live the way they wanted to. So now they are trying to be more in tune with the world around them, so that because they realize that the oil might run out and they might have to culturally keep up, not just be able to throw money at people and get them to shut up. So even Dubai, for that matter, even Qatar, investments into football and Qatar hosting the World Cup, all of these things are in fact almost like a preparation for the world after oil. So it's there. And another point on the whole manipulation using oil prices, there is also a lot of manipulation by OPEC and other oil producing countries into policies of heavy oil importers, like countries like India and stuff, or countries like the US, where they actually get into the political side of things, where they influence politicians to not just influence import of oil, but also downplay research and innovation money into renewable sources of energy. Because the whole point is that right now that is the biggest threat to oil prices. So the argument being that if you keep it low enough for the long haul, they are able to maintain the oil supremacy, and the technological advancement gets delayed enough so that it just about enough, so that it does not coincide the rise in petroleum prices.
Overall, not a very nice bunch of...
Oh yeah, for sure.
And just one of the OPEC guys. Very
much so.
We don't have too much of a listenership in Riyadh, do we?
They're all your followers, Chakil.
My Mallu brethren. Okay, so now the question is, in India, why are prices so consistently high? If so much fluctuation has happened over the last, why have our prices actually never gone down? If you think about it. The answer is simple, taxes. There is a wonderful video created by this guy called Dhruv Rathi, which, any of you guys who are...
Generally just follow Dhruv Rathi.
Yeah, basically, I mean, it's not about, left, right, none of that. He's like facts and explains it so beautifully and simply. He did a video last year, more innocent times when petrol was just at 70 per liter.
Wow.
Yeah. Crude oil was at $52 at that point of time, and he calculated like crude oil 52 means this many liters, etc. So when it comes to India, etc., it cost the government 33 rupees per liter at that point of time, which meant that the rest was all taxes. And depending on which state you were, the taxes were either 100 to 140% on the oil that the government was buying and refining, etc., for 33 and selling it for 70. So then when global prices went down, we didn't end up paying less. What happened was the government just slowly filled it up with excise tax. So if you see from a few years ago, while oil has gotten cheaper for the government to buy, for us it's got more expensive because excise taxes, they've slowly increased. It's just like we say, work occupies to fill time. It's like excise tax occupies to fill like your potential savings.
So petrol doesn't come under GST then?
No. That's why. That's why. When it increases, here's the thing. When it increases, the buggers cite, international reasons, conflict over here, somebody sneezed, therefore prices will increase. But they never. But when the price decreases, they never talk about it.
So this is what. In fact, the funny thing is with the BJP infamous tweet where they put the graph there.
Yeah.
Actually, Congress tweeted another thing correcting it, where what they did was in the graph they actually put they corrected the scales of everything. And on parallel, they said all the Congress price rises were concurrent with the rise in petroleum prices globally. But the BJP rise was only the global petroleum price crashed. And concurrently you're seeing BJP the price rising.
Yeah, exactly. So going back to those, like even huge massive protests were there back when the Congress was in the government. If those current tactics were used, the petrol price would have reached over 170 rupees per liter. At that point of time, if the excise duty thing over here that's happening right now was applied at that time, it would have been 170 rupees per liter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty that. And people had nothing to say to this Dhruv Rathi video. Like, what? I mean, in the face of facts, what do bucks do?
Yeah, it's brutal facts, right?
Yeah, it's brutal facts. Like one guy commented, blasting, say, it is liter and not LITRE. This is the level of discourse. So anyway, it's currently around rupees 20 excise per litre. The dealer gets 3 to 4 rupees. It's not under GST ambit. So that's basically why prices in India are so high. So another thing that's fascinated me, which I wanted to check, was like, if prices are so high, then how do oil companies make so much money in India? So here's where I learned the difference between upstream and downstream companies. So upstream companies are basically guys who take stuff upstream, who basically get the oil. These are guys like IOC and ONGC, and for them high oil prices are great because they manage to sell it, and since it's a going market rate, they make a lot of money out of it. On the other hand, downstream companies are the companies that you have probably interacted with to buy petrol, like a BP or an HPCL or something, and these guys get the brunt of it. So ONGC and IOC, they have like shitloads of money. It's the BPs and HPCLs who have to bear the brunt of things. And with that, I am afraid I need to shell out a lot of poor humor. It's sorry, happened. I was in a car one day and it started raining. I was eating bread, but strangely enough, the bread tasted nice, but I could use it for fuel later because it became a hydro car bun.
My God, no.
Yeah. What do you call a very cute, what do you say to a very cute hydrocarbon? You're cho sweet. Cho? C-H-O? No? Okay.
Wow.
Okay. If your oil talks back to you, it's rude oil. No, it sounded better in my head. I'm sorry. Okay, what's the most expensive hydrocarbon? Come on. Very easy it is. Mercedes benzene. Very, very
cheap.
Yeah. See, you can't blame these ONGC people. They are of a different, like, they think differently. There's a different Brent of mind. Brent oil? No? Too much? Hey, if there's an alkane, why is there no al-able? To be fair, when I was searching for petroleum terms, the first thing I saw was something called an able tester, which is something that you use to test kerosene. Anyway, I was cooking one day and
by the way, there is no Abel because Cain killed Abel.
Unlabel, so it becomes like Arabic also that way. I was cooking and I was heating something very quickly. I was very concerned, it's not heating properly. And then like my wife came and said, hey, no, you need to slow it down. And I said, oh, why do you need to slow it down for it to work properly? He said, oh, this is like it's like a famous physician has written something on it. Oh, Boyle's law. So Boyle's law. Okay.
God, no.
Work much better in my head. Hey, this
I
singer.
think most things do, Chuck.
Yeah. So this seal, no. So then I was looking at other hydrocarbons. I ran out of enough hydrocarbon jokes. There's a singer called Seal, and he had this very enthu song which never made it, which is "Kiss from a Rose" became Sucrose. No, cancel that. Very bad.
What is this?
Very bad. Sucrose? No. Okay. Last one. Stiketh, I want you to play this game with me. You, CST, me, Churchgate. You, Bandra, me, Kurla. You, Andheri, me, Vikroli. You, Borivali, Methane.
Oh my God, no. Jesus, that was terrible.
Thanks.
What is the difference between the Opec's premium product and a very angry Maharashtrian who is quite abusive and who has listened to your pun run?
I don't know. Please tell.
One is crude oil, the other is a crude Isla.
This is the general state of affairs. All right, we need to go, guys, because somebody is going to start throwing things at us.
Mostly it's Naren.
I'm in a stunned silence.
So now, whenever you think of oil prices, please think of Thane. And we will see you soon, very shortly. We have a lot of things are happening in the world, so there are a lot of things for us to simplify.
Yes.
So we will be back. So Naren,
Stay safe, stay well oiled, and stay simplified.
See you around.
happy lubrication to all.
Give me a word या कोई भी लाइन, कुछ भी हो सकता है यार. क्या कहा आपने? टोपी. Okay. Mohan Joshi hated wearing topis. He felt suffocated in them. टोपी पहनते ही उसे स्कूल की याद आती थी. Where of course he had no choice but to wear a टोपी. वह जिस दिन पास आउट हुआ, उसी दिन उसने अपनी टोपी का bonfire बना दिया. And since then, he'd never worn a cap or a hat. न कड़कती धूप में, and not even to बचाओ from the ठंडी. But from Monday 26th February, Mohan Joshi had to wear a topi all the time. Why? Because if he didn't, everyone around him knew exactly what kya soch raha tha. They knew that he was wondering how the girl in the yellow churidar would look bina kapde ke. They knew when he was calling the boss a sadela tomato. They knew everything. पर ये सब हुआ कैसे? अरे भाई, यही तो स्टोरी है. और ये स्टोरी आप ही ने मुझे दिया by giving me the starting word. यही तो है The Croc's Tales. Words आपके, कहानी आपके लिए. Catch the stories on Monday and Thursday on the IVM website, app, and anywhere you get your podcast from. See you soon.
Yeah. It's IVM here, let's go. We the IVM kids on the block over here. Just to talk, taking a break from producing all day. Coming on this podcast cause we got stuff to say. IVM Daily is the name of the show. Monday to Friday, we ready to go. Talking about stuff in our head. We might even talk about our favorite bread. Signing out, it's IVM here, the podcast network that's in your ear.
Catch IVM Daily, Monday to Friday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.